Hey guys, what is up? It is me, Pagey, here once again with another video on Superman and Lois for Season 4, which is also the final season. So with that upcoming fourth and final season of Superman and Lois, next year sometime, was still sort of waiting on when the hell that's actually going to specifically come out. It is, as we've probably mentioned more than a few times now, it's going to be ending the DC reign on the CW, as well as ushering in this new era of DC TV over on HBO Max, or Max, what do you want to call it now, with this new DC interconnected universe that's going to be happening. But as you do usually have when, heading into a final season of a show, many are wondering how they choose to wrap it up, whether that is with the story of the show itself or just certain characters within the show itself. Of course, an advantage with Superman and Lois and heading into its final season is that they know that it's the case. They aren't finding out like halfway through production of the season, or finding out maybe not until they've actually finished filming that this is it, that there's not going to be anything after it. So they are able to plan and change anything that might have been intended to continue into another season into something that fits into, like, saying farewell to, the show as a whole, or with a certain character's storyline and what's been going on with them. But in this video, I thought it would be cool to go over some of the possible endings when it comes to the story and certain characters. So these are just the ones that I've written down that were on my mind as possible options. But if you have any, feel free to let me know in the comment section down below as something that you could see happening in this final season, because you're probably on the money, I guess, unless it's something ludicrous. So maybe just avoid anything that's too ridiculous. But yeah, I'm sure there'll be more than a few options that I will not bring up. So the first one is one that I've seen myself online, and I just thought I'd include it at the beginning. It's not one that I really can see happening. I think it'd be a bit too over the top. But it also could be something that actually happens within the season itself. Maybe. Just considering how last season ended, and that's actually Superman dies. Now, I don't think you'd end the show with that at all. I think that's a really... I just don't like it when shows do that, whether it's a superhero one or just some other show. Like, you kill whether it's the main character or one of the main characters just for the sake of it, because the show's ending. Like, Arrow did it. I gave Arrow the pass, if you want to put it, or the clear with it, just because of where it tied into with Crisis and the sacrifice there. It wasn't just killing him just because it was the end of the show. Because it tied into Crisis, I just sort of went, okay, I can deal with that. I wasn't necessarily happy with it, but I can deal with it. But yeah, with Superman dying, I don't think doing that at the end of the show would be the way to go, but it could easily happen right at the beginning. Like, maybe it literally happens episode 1 that we see him die, and that's just because of the Doomsday scenario that we had at the end of last season. So that's easily a possibility there. That's something definitely to keep in mind. The next one is probably one that's a bit more suitable, that includes Superman and I guess maybe Superman not being a thing after it, and that's just Superman retires. And this might seem a bit over the top and some might not like it, and I don't actually think it's that likely, though there's still like a slither that something like that could happen, because like, you saw the response that happened in Crisis. Remember when they brought back like the Tom Wellings Clark, who had become Superman from Smallville. They brought him in, and we found out that whenever it was, X amount of years ago, he stopped being Superman and gave up his powers so he could have a family and stuff like that. But that's sort of the main reason I think that maybe there could be an issue with it. But I think it depends on the context of the world. Like, this is a different world that Superman is living in, where there's like no other heroes. It's actually like less like filled out than Smallville was, because we knew that had like its own Justice League and everything. So with this version, I think you can actually probably make a case that he could retire and it wouldn't be that detrimental to the world, especially if you had someone like his son Superboy, and like that's something that they could clearly do and almost be like a passing of the torch. However, I think it's something that they won't do, but it's definitely something that is an option that I think could make sense, but I just have a feeling people wouldn't like it too much, and that they might know that, so they might just stick clear of it. The next thing that I can see happening, in this end part of this season is around Lex Luthor, and it's around him actually not being defeated. And maybe his storyline is like about him like reestablishing himself, and we get Lex Luthor and Superman in a position that we are used to seeing them in like the comics and stuff, with this like larger than life business identity, and Superman always there to catch him out when needed. I think they could do that, because we also led to believe that like Lex Luthor and Superman obviously were foes, but not for that long. Like, Superman hasn't been around for like 50 years or something, and Lex Luthor was in prison for over a decade, so he was probably prison longer than him and Superman actually went up against each other. So I think leaving Lex in that space where he's still Lex and he just doesn't go back to prison again, just sort of like, you know, as like a sandwich, sort of like we met him in prison this season, then he ends in prison. I think they might leave him in this position where he is just still Lex Luthor out there and stuff like that. I think that'd actually be pretty interesting. And it would be an interesting story for the final season with Lex as the antagonist. It's just a story of how he becomes the classic Lex that many are used to, because apparently, based on what we've seen, he was running around with a full head of hair. Now he's got the bald head going on, so now he's that classic looking Lex, and you can sort of put him in that position of the classic Lex as well. And that sort of supports keeping Superman in that spot as well. But I think that'd be an interesting way to do it. But also, you want some fights there as well, so it makes you curious what they'll do alongside the antagonistical side. Is it Lex with like an exosuit, or is there some other villains associated that Lex puts together? That'll be very curious. One interesting thing that I think I sort of wouldn't want them to do, but I can see people really wanting them to do, and that's establishing other heroes on this world, like this specific Earth in the multiverse. Now, this would be a stretch potentially, and that's just because they went out of their way to say that there aren't any other people with powers on this Earth. But as we know, anything can be like randomly retconned if you really want to do it. But I think this could be something that they might want to do, because it leaves like an open book, if you want to put it, where you can imagine what would happen with Superman team up with these other heroes, create his own league of sorts, if you want to put it. They could do that, but also they don't need to. Like, I think it'd almost be like a luxury thing if they think it'd be cool for people to like imagine what they want to do here. But Superman and Lois has always been a bit of a closed off show, and it's sort of just been on its own. So I don't think they'd feel the need to. But it's definitely an option there, and it's something that I could see people wanting, and maybe it's a thought that's run past the writers' minds, but I don't know if it won't be anything that actually becomes a reality. The next thing is a pretty simple one. Superboy becomes proper Superboy. Like, I think we need him to become proper Superboy, and hopefully after the end of last season, and even what happens at the beginning of this upcoming season, in season 4, there's some more trust put there. And if Superman potentially does like die with the whole doomsday thing, which I was referring to earlier, what if he has to take the lead? What if he has to sort of step up and be like, hey, well, my dad's not here, I have to sort of do something here and protect people, and that could happen, and then that sort of pushes him to become that Superboy proper that many people have been waiting to see, complete with a suit and everything like that. So I could see maybe that being something that happens throughout the season, but also something that they might leave until the last stages, especially when it comes to like a suit and everything like that, because they can just make one that looks good, and they don't have to necessarily make one that moves, that it has to move in, and that would like make it a bit cheaper to like make a reality. So yeah, I think that's something that a lot of people want to see come the close of season 4, though it could happen earlier. This is one for Lois Lane, this next one. And I don't think it's anything that's going to happen, but once again, we don't necessarily know like the logistical side of this season and where it's going to happen and everything like that, let alone where it's going to finish. But I don't know if this has happened in the comics. I don't think it has. So this would be an interesting thing for them to just do on the show. Correct me if I'm wrong if it's happened in the comics, but I have a feeling it hasn't. And that's Lois becoming the editor-in-chief at the Daily Planet. I think that would be an interesting way to tie it off, especially when you think about how the show began, where she was like, you know, kicked out, you know, well, she didn't get fired. She quit because she wrote that article, and they like made it into like a, what do you call it? Like a puff piece, whatever they call it. That's what she quit, didn't she? I think that's what happened. She quit. So it'd be interesting if she came back and that was the role there, even if they did like a 5 years later sort of thing and picked up there and she was in that position. I think that'd be pretty interesting. Or maybe she starts her own thing if they really wanted to go down that route. But I think ending Lois in a way where she's like back doing journalism full time, but also at a high position, would be an interesting way to look at it. So I wouldn't mind them doing something like that. And the next like proper thing that you'd sort of be thinking about is a pretty open one. That's an open ending. And that's sort of like the Flash series finale, if you saw that, where we know that Superman will continue to be Superman within this world, and there isn't some like major thing that changes up in regards to that, but it leaves us, the viewers, you know, satisfied for the most part in regards to what we've seen. Arrow would sort of be the opposite of this, where they wrapped up most things, and of course Green Arrow died, as I said earlier on, so no going on from that point. And I think this would work the best where we can imagine what Jordan goes on to do with his powers, and even Jonathan with his life, potentially by leaving us little crumbs or seeds, or just straight up showing us at least a little bit of it. Like, even like with Jonathan, you know, he doesn't have powers, so maybe he follows his mother's side in regards to journalism, maybe like sports journalism. That's what he gets into. Like an internship at the Daily Planet wouldn't be too hard to obtain with Lois Lane as your mother, so that's definitely a path that they could go down. But just leaving an open ending there that shows that, like, you know, we're leaving these characters, but they're not leaving this world. They're going to continue to go on and do these different things. At least specifically like Jordan and Jonathan, just because, you know, they're younger and they necessarily haven't done a ridiculous amount, but you can sort of tease where they're going to go. But then you can also do it with a character like Superman and Lois as well. And the final thing to bring up isn't necessarily like, you know, a specific thing, but it's loose ends. Like, it's wondering, is there going to be loose ends when we leave the show? And I think the answer to that is probably going to be yes. Like, usually when every single show ends, there's always loose ends, whether it comes down to the fact that you couldn't get a character back to tie up a thing from a previous season, time, setting, context, whatever it might be. There's usually going to be loose ends. It just depends, like, how big of a loose end is it? And with Superman and Lois, I think the only larger loose ends are pretty much things to do with the characters that are no longer going to be series regulars this season, depending if they come back or not. Like, it seems like Sam Lane isn't coming back based off all the reports, but that's not been confirmed yet, but it seems like it. And he just disappears off screen at the end of last season. He's just captured. Is he dead? Is he alive? What's going on there? So that could be something that's just referenced off screen where we don't see the character. And then there's just some of those other characters as well, like, are we going to see Lana again? How are they going to wrap that up? Will they wrap it up? Or do we just see them and that's it? Like, those are probably the biggest loose end possibilities coming into this final season, is those things going from season 3 to season 4. So we'll have to wait and see what they do there. I'm sure they have a plan of action in regards to handling that, but it's also like a bit of a rough one to have a guess in regards to what they're going to do there. So that's probably the biggest, like, you know, possibility of a loose end there. But yeah, guys, thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, be awesome, could drop a like and show support. Let me know in the comment section down below your thoughts on this. Is there anything that you're sort of hoping for in this final season, especially when it comes to the ending and how everything's going to end? Let me know your thoughts down there in the comment section down below. And of course, if you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe, and I will catch you guys later. Goodbye.